Welcome to the Live Courageously podcast show. I'm your host, John Duffy, and this is the 52nd Live Courageously podcast show since I started the show about 2 years ago. Live Courageously has been the conscious theme of my life from the last 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, and has been an unconscious theme for most of my life. Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. So today, let's meet today's courageous guest, Scott Duncan. Scott Duncan, U.S. Marine Corps retired, served in the Marine Corps for 21 years as a logistician, well, that's a tough word, commanded at the company and battalion level and served in combat in Iraq. Since transitioning from the Marine Corps in 2012, Scott successfully concentrated his energy and commitment to workforce development strategies in support of transitioning military service members and veterans. Those outcomes have led to their successful transition, recruitment, and employment into the civilian workforce. Over time, his advocacy for those who served has become his passion. It's Scott's why. Scott is committed to helping others by shining a light on the path to a better life, helping people discover what's next beyond service. He understands how to motivate and lead people in achieving optimum results through personal engagement, listening, and team building. His experiences have taught him the critical importance of building and maintaining solid personal and professional relationships. And these relationships lay the foundation for achieving maximum results in both life and business. Scott also created and hosted a podcast show, What's Next Beyond Service, and is an advisor to the Power of Our Story. Greetings, Scott, and welcome to Live Courageously.
Well, John, I tell you what, that was one heck of an introduction. I'm very humbled. You put a little bit of work into that compared to what I gave you. And I just want to thank you for having me on your show today.
Well, you're very welcome. I always start out the show with two questions, so I'm going to do that today as well. And the first one I always ask my guests, because not every guest, but almost all the 52 so far have been people I've met personally in life, not just through the social media. So how did we meet? What was our first encounter? And then I'd like to share that with the audience too, because it kind of gives them a little insight to how people connect in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, so from what I recall, I got a call from a friend of mine who is a retired Marine, and he asked me, Paul Cucinato, by the way, he's a retired Marine colonel. We kind of grew up in the Marine Corps together, and he asked hey, are you busy in a few days? I was going to come out to California and be the keynote at Wings Over Wendy's, an organization that was started about 20 years ago, and I know you'll correct me if I get any of this wrong, by some Air Force fellows, and it's grown to hundreds of folks over the years here in Southern California mainly. But at any rate, he was unable to fulfill the keynote speaking address, so he asked if I could do it, and he connected me with some folks there. I showed up, gave the keynote address. You were the first person that I met when I came in to the country club there where the event was being held. You and I chatted for a while. You actually showed me where the men's room was, which was kind of important after a 3.5 hour drive in LA traffic with a lot of coffee to get there in the morning. But at any rate, so yeah, that's how we connected. It was kind of through LinkedIn, but with some help from a Marine and the folks in your organization. And I want to tell you, that was a fantastic day, by the way. I got to meet a lot of really good people who have similar concerns about, I guess, where we're headed as a country, but also understand the importance of service, military service, but then going beyond that and serving in our communities and doing great things to help people and lift folks up. And I was very, very pleased to see that you guys were all about that stuff, and that even some World War II veterans were at the event. There was maybe 5 or 6. I can't remember the number, but they're still kicking and they're still showing up. So God bless them.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you gave an excellent, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but you gave an excellent presentation keynote to Wings Over Wendy's, who's shout out to Ed Reynolds, who kind of heads it up, and Bob Donovan, who reached out to you. And of course, Bob and myself have been friends with Paul Cucinaris for years now. So the fact that he connected you, Bob felt very comfortable that was going to be a great speaker if Paul recommended you. So I think you lived up to the occasion. You gave an excellent presentation. And there was one gentleman there, like you said, one guy, I think he's in his late 90s, Barney Leone, who's from the Bronx like myself, and has a great history. And, it's a great group of people, all through, even when COVID was going on, they met virtually, and then they met in person, and they were not afraid to come out and meet, and they're all in their like 80s and 90s. What a great group of courageous people, which leads me to my second question, but I'll come back to your speech, is what does living courageously mean to you, Scott?
That's a good question. Well, a couple things come to mind, but here recently, I think living courageously for me is speaking your truth, whether that's comfortable or not, and sometimes it may make others uncomfortable, but not that you're looking to make people uncomfortable, but sometimes when you speak your truth, it may be hard for others to maybe understand, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be kind with your words, right? There's a way to let folks know what you're thinking about and what you believe. You should feel very confident in speaking to your beliefs, but you shouldn't feel like you can't, right? I think we really need to make sure that we understand that our First Amendment matters and that people serve in the military and first responders, right? We're all kind of in this together, and that our system of government is the best there is, and that those men who founded this country, they were ordained, I believe, from God, and what they said then is more important now than maybe then, because we're going through some interesting times, which I won't get into all that. But so in answering your question, I think living courageously is believing in what you believe, being willing to talk about it, and then being willing to listen to other people as well, because that's part of being courageous too. If you're wanting folks to listen to you, you have to do the same with others and be willing to think about what they say, because you know what, maybe they're right, or their opinion should be listened to. So,
well, all that I agree, but I really like the last point you just made, because I think for people to realize, to have courage is all kinds of things, right? And we'll talk about that. In your courage and serving in the military, that's one form of courage. It's all forms of courage. But there's small little courages, but they're still being courageous and willing to listen to people and consider their things, and having that ability to not be afraid to do that and be willing to challenge your own opinions is courage. Because a lot of people don't have, unfortunately, or have not been given the advice to be able to take that on. So a lot of people just don't want to listen to other people, or they're afraid to hear an opinion that disagrees with their opinion, because on some level it threatens them, and that's when you exhibit that courage. So thank you for bringing that point up. Just going through your thing to take us through the journey, tell us your background and what got you to join the U.S. Marine Corps, and then a little bit of your journey in the Marine Corps, so we understand who you were and who you became as you went through that path in life.
Oh, certainly. So going back a number of, yeah, going back way back, my grandfather on my mom's side was a Marine. He grew up in the Depression era in Lake Erie, Pennsylvania. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, his best friend comes to him and says, "Hey, Paulie, the Japanese just bombed Pearl Harbor, and we need to go join the Marines." He didn't know what Pearl Harbor was. He'd never really heard of the Marines. He was just a country boy in Pennsylvania who went with his buddy to enlist in the Marine Corps. His friend was unable to get into the Marine Corps, and so he went into the Army and had a different experience. He was in Europe. My grandfather wound up fighting in the Battle of Tarawa, which is one of the bloodiest battles of the Second World War, and he survived, came back, and spent 35 years as a fireman in the Federal Firefighting Service. So I grew up listening to stories about the Marine Corps and about being a firefighter, and then about service to community, because he was a member of the same church for nearly 60 years. And as he got older, he got into Meals on Wheels, where they're taking meals to shut-ins, and he helped run the soup kitchen at the church. So he was very involved in community, in giving to others. And that was a seed planted in me. When I was younger, I didn't necessarily understand all of it, until you start experiencing life and you have memories that when things seem familiar and it's like, oh, granddaddy talked about that, or granddaddy did that. So a long way about why I became a Marine. He was fundamentally why. Even though he served 4 years, I admired him for the man that he had become. And I always thought, if I could be a third of the person that he became, I would be a successful person. I would be a good person. So now my dad, my biological dad, he was in the Air Force. He was actually Marine Corps Reserve, and then went into the Air Force for some unknown reason. But no, he was a musician. He was a very good musician. His dad was too. So he had a great career in as a musician in the Air Force. My stepdad did 27 years in the Navy. He was a chief engineman. My biological dad, they were enlisted. And then my brother was in the Army. He was in artillery. So I had the choice of services, but again, my grandfather helped me kind of hone in on the Marine Corps. And I raised my right hand as the end of the Gulf War was, it was turning down. But I felt at that point, I'd already gone through college and had a job. But when Desert Storm picked up, I felt obligated. Even going back further, I wanted to fly in the Marine Corps. But in college, my eyesight changed. So I decided, well, we'll see what happens. Desert Storm comes up. I raise my right hand with the OSO, and it takes like 9 months to go from raising your hand to being approved, all the way up to Philadelphia, where they put a blessing on it. Then you go and get approval from Congress and all that good stuff. So I wound up getting commissioned in April of '92 and served for 21 years. Served in combat in Iraq in 2003. I was with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. It's a special ops capable unit. You go through workups to get that credentialing, so to speak. And so we sailed out of San Diego. I remember looking at the shoreline, going outside of the little bay area and thinking, man, I hope this isn't the last time I see this place. And that thought was in a lot of folks' head, right, as we were kind of sailing off into the unknown. And we even got into 40-foot seas on the way over, because it was, wintertime, and you get some storms that are pretty nice out in the Pacific. But anyhow, I was part of the folks that kicked the door open in Iraq. That was a very interesting time in my career, because you train a lot as a Marine for combat. And you always wonder, are you going to meet the mark? Are the folks that your Marines and sailors, are they going to do what you entrust them to do? And the unit that I was with was an incredible unit. Everybody did what they were supposed to do times 10. Wow. And even when things became complicated, they thought of creative ways to fix problems or to go around something to get to the objective. And, looking back on that was the most fulfilling. Even though it was the most challenging time in my service, it was the most fulfilling, because fortunately for us, no one in our unit died in combat. We had some folks who were injured, but we all came back alive and continued service in the Marine Corps. Fast forward, I was a lieutenant colonel, and I was at 3rd Marine Air Wing, and I was the assistant chief of staff, G4 for aviation ground support. I worked in the general staff, and I was helping to prepare to go to Afghanistan because the Marine Corps in 2009 was taking on the responsibility for transitioning in 2010 to take over in Afghanistan. So I was part of all the planning to get all the aviation assets and ground aviation assets over to Afghanistan, and spent a lot of time in the planning. And then right when we were getting ready to execute, I got selected for command and wound up having to go to my command and didn't deploy to Afghanistan. So that was kind of a bittersweet thing with me, because you prepare with your folks, then your folks go without you. And so you feel, I mean, it is what it is, right? You take your orders and you go, but you still feel like, not that you let them down, but you feel like you should have been there,
Right. That you wanted to be there with them. That was the people, and you wanted to go as a leader to that place with them.
Right. And well, I even asked the general at the time, the CG, I said, hey, is it possible to go and then replace me in theater? And he said, no. He said, that's a little too much. It's hard to find lieutenant colonels. And so, we're going to go ahead and find the guy to replace you now, and you go on and be a battalion commander. So that's what I did. I did my 2 years. And then at the end of my 2 years as a battalion commander, I was 6 months away from being looked at for 06, for full bird colonel. And they wanted to extend me a year in command, which is a good thing. And then it was top level school. If you do this extra year, we'll look at sending you to top level school, a joint tour of the Pentagon, which is another check in the block career wise, and then we'll see what happens. But at that point in my life, I had been away from family a lot, and my family was in California, and I would have spent 2 to 5 years away from the family, and that would have been by choice, not like you're with a unit that's deploying, but making the choice to be a geographic bachelor. That's what we call it. So I decided it was time to go, and so I was just over 20, and by the time I retired, I was retiring at 21 years service. But I love the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps has changed a lot in the last 11 years I've been out, but I still love being a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. And I think service is important, and I think younger folks need to understand that.
Well, I know, my first involvement or meeting the Marine Corps was I was hired with a company to do some training videos for the Marine Corps, and we went to Camp Pendleton, and then we went down to Quantico both for their winter and summer training programs for the OCS, and we went down to South Carolina, and we filmed all these videos, basically recruitment videos for the U.S. Marine Corps. And at the time, that was the first time I was up close and personal, and we saw everything from when they came across and stood on the yellow footprints to they be actually graduated, all that, as that experience. And for me, it was on every level. I felt at that time that I had met the best people I've met in my life in that. The people who were, in leadership, the actual people who are willing to commit to become Marines, their families who were supporting them on that journey. And it was just an incredible experience for me to come across such amazing people with such commitment of service. And so that kind of triggered a thing in me to go, what do I do to give, as a civilian, to give back? And that's why I started volunteering in Hollywood to all the support for military veterans who are trying to work in the industry. I was like, what can I do? Anything you need, I'm there. What do you need? I'm there. Because I was so impressed by it. It definitely changed my perspective on life in such a positive way. And I never would have had that experience if I didn't get up close and personal and get to see who they really are and what they do. And then I've made great friends like Paul Cucinato, and then we met at that event, and then we got a chance to sit down when I came down to Temecula to go to support this group that's rescuing children from sex traffickers. We were going to have like a 15-minute coffee, and I think it was 2 hours that we spent together talking, right? And that's we could have spent another 2 hours, I'm sure. But that, that's kind of what connected us. And then you connected me with a woman Marine to be on my show. and then I wanted to have you on as well. So, it's just that thing, you said it in the beginning, service. You got it from your grandfather, you went in, you served in the thing, and then out of the military. And there's one story you told me, Scott, that I love, that really struck with me that day over coffee in the morning, was you were talking about, you'd be working at base and you'd be exhausted, long hours, and you'd come by home and you'd see this gigantic flag. Tell us that story, man.
You remember that?
That just touched me, man. It was just such a powerful story.
Well, yeah, John. I mean, it's true. That was when I was with the the MUSOC program, and you're busy. You're busy getting ready for that. To make that qualification, and then to get on the Navy ships and go do business, right? So I was getting up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, getting to work, by around 5:30 ish, and then a lot of times not getting home till close to midnight. And I had about a 40-minute drive without traffic. And leaving that late and that early, I didn't really hit a whole lot of traffic, right? So I guess that was the upside, missing Southern California traffic. But yeah, coming home very tired because you're also out in the field, doing ops and whatnot as you're getting ready to deploy. So you're coming home beat and coming down the hill, down the 15 as you're dropping into Temecula Valley, and you look over to your left and you see this gigantic flag. And usually in the evening, there's a breeze. And as big as that flag is, somehow that thing kicks up. And it's just like slow motion as it ripples and bends in the wind. And every time, no matter how damn tired I was, I got chill bumps and I just felt my heart. God bless America. We are so fortunate to live here and, protecting and defending the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It means something. And that's why we raise our right hand and we swear that oath. And that was a motivator. And I mean, I think God put that flag there because it's more than just me seeing that flag, right? That's a huge, you can't miss that flag. There's no way.
But it's just, once again, after all that time, all those years, all your commitment, all your service, just that, you got goosebumps on your arm. That's why it stood out for me. It was like, that you still had that, it was a deep emotional feeling that was so powerful. And that's why I remember that.
Well, John,
story.
It's like whenever you hear the Marine hymn, that chill goes up and down your spine, and I get it
you have
today.
It behind
still.
you too, but your slogan. I got one of these, of course, from all your friend or my friends who are in the Marine Corps. And it's and you're right.
Yeah,
and you got one right behind you, Semper Fi, right? And
always faithful.
Always faithful. And that all that commitment to service. People don't realize that one of the greatest gifts you can have in life is to serve others. And you can serve in all kinds of different ways. And people who don't serve or don't give to others are just they lose in the process because they don't gain the what you get from being in service. And so you do the 21 years in the military, but then you come out and now you're a civilian, but you're still serving. So take us through that transition for yourself, how you transitioned, and then all the ways that you're still in service now. And we'll get into the podcast and the other ways that you're in service to help others, military people, to do that same process and be successful in life and be of service to others.
Right. Well, so as I said, I retired in 2012, and it wasn't a planned retirement in that I made a decision to retire relatively soon because they wanted to keep me for another year. And if I would have said yes, the second and third order effects were more than what I was willing to go into at the time. Because I had done 20 years, and so I decided to retire. So I had like 90 days to get my act together to retire. And it takes 2 years to have a solid plan and execution of a plan to have a good turnover, because there's a lot of things that go into retirement. So people that are thinking about retiring, or even if you're not thinking about retiring, you got to think about how you leave the military, right? Because it could happen like me, hey, you have a decision to make, or you get injured and your service is over. So if you're not thinking about these things, you should be. Certainly if you're getting up towards ending your time in service. So for me, I didn't have a solid transition plan. So I learned a lot of valuable lessons about I should have been paying more attention to that as I approached 20. And I wasn't. I was thinking, hey, I've easily got another 5 or 10 years in this green machine. So I did learn some very well learned, but maybe not graceful lessons about how to transition. It was tough at first, but I wound up connecting with some folks locally here, a gentleman, and we talked about the fact that we felt service was important. How could we help veterans who were transitioning from service? And again, having a kind of a bumpy road out, that really clued in with me. I thought, hey, this is good stuff. What can we do with this? So, long story short, we started recruiting and bringing folks into a training program. And the training program ended up in a credentialing certificate that is a North American gold standard for the industry. It's the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners in the solar industry. So you teach them how to design and build PV solar systems, residentially and commercially. So we recruit, we train them, we got them to take the test at the end of the training. They pass, they get their cert, and then we had a what's the word? A placement pipeline for companies that were local companies, regional, and then companies at the national level who were looking to hire people who served in the military, who also had that credential for the industry, because it's expensive to, take your employee out of the job, send them to school, get them trained, because it takes, depending on which program, it could take up to a month, right? So anyhow, the program was very successful. We had good success getting on to the bases and stations, the Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, to have time to present, explain to them what the program's about, why it's important to, get credentialed. And then we brought them in, trained them, and then we placed them across the United States. Now, I did that with the beginning company nonprofit, but then I peeled off and replicated what I was doing with a new company that actually was able to train folks locally in Southern California, and then also proctor the exam. So everything was self-contained. Also wound up partnering with another gentleman that owned a business college, and we were able to work with him to work with the state of California to be able to bring in the VA component, so that veterans didn't have to pay out of pocket. Their VA benefits would pay for the program. So it was no direct cost to them, right? It was the benefit that they accrued through their VA benefits, the post 9/11 benefits. So, we did a lot of good stuff. We placed probably close to 200 people during that time frame. And I was looking to expand upon that, but the folks I partnered with were in the solar industry, and they were, focused down that lane. I wanted to open it up to HVAC training, to maybe plumbing, to some medical fields, and we decided to go our own way, which was fine, right? I mean, things don't last forever, but as I was looking to get in with another gentleman, COVID came up, and then everything kind of shut down. And so during 2020, I met with Sarah Carell, who I love to death. She is an incredible woman. She's runs the Power of Our Story, and she's built that thing out to an amazing organization that is about service. Yeah, well, there you go, right there. And that's from their website. That's their logo. And essentially, they work with veterans, with first responders, and they create what, kind of a safe space, for lack of a better word, where they can come in and talk about things that are stressful for them, whether it's post-traumatic stress, um, whatever the issue might be, right? Because some folks have a very difficult time in transition. It's not just a checklist that you leave the military from. There's things that happen to you. You may get injured physically or morally, and that's a moral injury is a real thing. And without getting into the specifics on that, but at any rate, Sarah asked if I was interested in joining the Power Story, and I was talking to her. I said, this is good timing because I was looking to uh, build a podcast, and I wanted to focus on veterans transitioning from service to help them because, yeah, there are programs set up, transition programs to help get folks from A to Z. But it's kind of on a checklist mentality, right? It's all the things that you need to go through. And there's a lot of really good lists or charts that go, 2 years out from your retirement time that tell you need to do this at this time, this at that time. Make sure and that's great. But, a monkey can do that, right? And so what about the things that they don't talk about, like a loss of your sense of purpose, how to interview, how to write a resume, how to network? I mean, there's a lot of things that are not necessarily tangible up front. There's an art and a science. And so it takes time to understand these things and to go through the process of learning how to write a resume and learning how to interview, how to answer questions, but getting to the sense of purpose thing, that was kind of a prime mover for me because when especially if you serve 20 or 30 years, that's all you know. And you are completely vested in your service. Then you come out and you're not wearing a uniform anymore. And maybe your hair's a little longer. Folks don't identify necessarily that, hey, you served. And it can become lonely, especially if you're not successful securing employment and you really need employment, right? Some folks serve 30 years and they're comfortable. Others maybe did 10 years and they're married, they have a mortgage, they've got bills, they've got to quickly find a job. And if you're not successful doing that, you can really start to doubt yourself. Why did I get out of the military? I should have stayed in. Or, man, I thought that with all my experience, this was going to be easy. But I've sent hundreds of resumes. I'm not getting anyone replying. It's always, well, hey, thank you. Or maybe they don't even reply at all, right? And, so then you start to feel, gee whiz, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. And you can start to get into a bit of a spin. Some folks can go into a deep spin. They can start drinking or maybe doing drugs or having, psychological issues of depression. And it can get pretty dark. So all of that said, that was kind of the catalyst for why I wanted to have my podcast. And my podcast, real quick, I bring in folks who have successfully transitioned from military service. It's what's next beyond service. Thanks, John. And I also included over time, through being with the Power Story, I included first responders because they have a similar process with how hard transitioning is. They don't have a VA, right? They don't have all the benefits that we have with the federal government through our military service. And it's difficult for them. And they're also facing the possibility of death just about every day, as a police officer or even a firefighter, right? It's just a different job. And thank God for the courageous men and women that do that. They help keep the flames of freedom alive here at home. But I expanded my program to those people. So I would, go out and find these folks, chat with them, and then, they'd agree to come on. And then we would talk about a little bit about their background in service, whatever it was. And then we spend the most of the time talking about their journey in transition. What went well? What, were the mistakes you made? What would you do over again? What are the top two things advice-wise that you want to share with the audience for folks who will be transitioning? And it's amazing. These people all were willing to tell, open kimono, so to speak, what their issues were. And I have about 43, I can't remember the exact number, podcast from my first season. I took almost a year off to go to season 2. A lot of change happening on the home front. And so probably in early November, I'll be kicking off season 2. And so anyhow, I'm kind of opening the aperture on what the podcast is going to be about. I'll be doing what I just explained, but I've got a few more things in the hopper to kind of expand on what service is.
And your previous 43 shows are available on YouTube under,
Yes.
once again, What's Next Beyond Service. So you can find it on YouTube, and then you'll start up again in November, and then you'll expand that particular podcast show, given that. One of the issues that you touched on and went a little bit into is how do you give, or what do you recommend to get back that when someone loses their purpose? Because like you said, if depending on the length of time, obviously the longer, the harder maybe. But when you have a sense of purpose, you also have a team. You're part of a group that everybody they're working together. So you got a family, and that family is part of who you are. And all of a sudden you step out of that identity, and now your identity, your family disappears with that in a way. Yeah, you still have friends with the people in the military with you, or police or wherever, but you don't have the same relationship. Time, you move on, everybody moves into their own worlds, right? How do you gain back? What do you recommend to people to get back that sense of purpose, so that loss doesn't affect them in a debilitating way?
Right. Now that's an excellent question. And how you spoke to it and, asking the question is exactly right. When you leave service, or, whether again it's military or first responder, the people that you were left and right shoulder with, they continue on. And you lose track with them. And that's part of life, right? Because
Right.
they're continuing with the mission. You did an about face and they kept going. And so, first of all, my advice is to reach out to the veteran community, folks who have transitioned, whether it's, local groups like, your VFWs or American Legion, or, if you go to like LinkedIn or Facebook, you'll see there's a lot of veteran organizations out there, right? In fact, there are like 40 some thousand nonprofits that are, veteran focused. I mean, there's a lot of things out there now that weren't necessarily available even 11 years, 10 or 11 years ago. So the first thing is to reach out to veterans, because you have a connection with them, folks that you have a common bond with, because chances are you're going to have a lot in common. And those folks are looking for you coming out of service. A lot of folks have their hand extended out to give you that hand up and to talk to you about the challenges that you may face when you do leave service. And they have advice for you. Not everyone has the best advice, right? But there are a lot of good-hearted people out there who served that want to give you their time. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is serving others, right? That gives such a sense of purpose. When you volunteer and the work you're doing is touching the lives of people, and you see it firsthand, when you do something that helps somebody and you directly witness the impact that it has on that person, a light comes on inside of you. You feel that warmth and that goodness of, wow. And maybe you feel like you didn't really do much, but when you see the collective impact of you and all the other folks working towards whatever that stated goal is of helping others, and you're successful and you see that goodness, man, a light comes on inside of you, and that sense of purpose and being, it might not be what you wind up doing, right? But knowing that you are still somebody that can wake up in the morning, have a sense of purpose to go do something that's positive, that impacts others, and how that makes you feel about yourself. It makes you feel good about yourself. And you should, because you're doing good. You're doing something good and you're helping people. So connecting with veterans, or other first responders, and then finding out, hey, where can I be of service in the community, and volunteering. And sometimes volunteering could turn into successful runs in nonprofits where you get into a paid position for the work that you're doing, and that's good too because you're still helping people. So yeah, those are the two main things. I mean, I've got a list, but yeah, those are the two
Yeah,
top.
and I mean, and so many organizations. I mean, I know, the volunteering I did, obviously in American Legion, Operation Gratitude, Team Red, White, and Blue, Zero Mills, which is what Paul's group is doing. I think that's the name, Zero Mills.
Yeah, I
right?
was going to mention them. Yeah.
Yes, they definitely need credit. But there's so many good groups out there with good people, and connecting with them is part of the process. And then the other part of it, I guess, is, what percentage of Americans serve in the military today? It's minuscule, right?
Yeah, it's like right at 1% ish.
Right, and it's volunteer, so it's 1% of people who volunteer to serve. So it isn't a giant group. And so the other connection is, and in those groups as well, is the connection to reconnect the veteran with the civilian population, or at least a segment of the civilian population that's willing to support that veteran and give them a hand up and give them connection or give them whatever, so that they reintegrate into the civilian population as well, because now it's a new identity. They're no longer in the military, they're now civilians who've served. And so, they need to make that connection too, and finding those groups that, kind of reintegrate you is important as well, I think. Did you hear? I think you got that. Or did we freeze?
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. It was buffering and kind of going in and out. So
Yeah, we've been
that
having.
30
I
seconds
had
ish, I
my
really
first
couldn't
show
hear.
had some tech stuff too. So, but anyway, I just kind of said a little bit about the civilian connection too, to help veterans connect back to the civilian population, so that so that they get back into that new identity. Because now you're not a fighter, you're not a warrior, you're now a civilian, and so you kind of got to make that identity shift as well. So you don't, because it takes different skill sets and different mindsets to be a civilian than it is to be a warrior in especially in combat. So having those organizations help you with that is important as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, can you hear me, Duffy?
Yes, I can. You're doing great, man. Everything on my side is perfect. I think it's just your side is hitting some kind of buffering problem.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. I'm having a hard time hearing you. But let me, if you can hear me, let me just say something. Are we good?
Yep. Keep going. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So yeah, Kevin Smeagol and Paul Cucinato, they serve together too. They're both artillerymen. And at the Zero Mills organization that they're running now, both him and Paul, they are working with industry to help connect veterans and industry to folks that are very employable. And they talk about military thriving. That's the environment that they want to establish and get employers and these folks that are transitioning from service, together to empower those folks to understand the goodness of the veteran you're going to get, and for the veterans to understand the opportunities that are out there for them. And when you look at all the things that veterans are facing when they transition, I think there's a lot of good work that goes into helping veterans who are struggling, right? Whether it's physically struggling or maybe they have post-traumatic stress. But something that a lot of folks don't necessarily get is that's not everyone transitioning from the military. Not everyone is physically injured or has other issues, So I think out of the goodness of people's hearts, that's what a lot of folks think of first when they think of veterans. But veterans are strong. And, folks that are injured, they're strong too, because they have to get through all those things that have changed their life. And they do. And so veterans are strong. They are able to do all the things they do in service, which most folks who don't serve can't imagine what operations are like overseas, whether you're in combat or whether you're just doing whatever your organization does when it goes and trains with another military. It's very complex. And a lot of things happen that are unexpected. And you have to be able to think on your feet, and you have to be able to lead people. And these are all things that people in the military learn, and they foster, their Marines and sailors and junior folks to step up. They empower them to do their job, right? And they work together to get things done. These are the kind of people that are leaving the service and will perform quite well once they, kind of get their legs about them. And like you say, they have that bit of an understanding of what it's like to get back into society as a civilian and not the guy or gal that's doing the things they do in the military. So that part of the transition is very real, kind of deprogramming, for lack of a better word. And I think that's where Paul and Kevin are doing a lot of good things and connecting, both ends to the middle.
Absolutely. And I think you make a great point, and I hope you can hear me, but a great point is that most of the troops that come back are not suffering from PTSD or suffering from that. And so Hollywood kind of presents only the injured and the wounded as if that's all there is. But you're right. The overwhelming majority are coming back with great skills, leaders, people who can improve any company that they get hired in. So it's understanding that that's the other side of the military, and people, employers especially, have to understand that you're not hiring somebody with a weakness necessarily. You're hiring people with strengths that's going to help your company, that's going to help your community and help the country. So that's the big side of it. And then my cousin from the UK, her husband served in the British Army, and she just said, the spouses also need recognition for assisting in the transition, because it has a big impact, and especially when you're married and you come home, that family unit is a support structure for you, and the spouses need to be supported as well. So she makes a great point, and she's going through some, physical struggles now. I'm not going to address that. She's just survived some, accident, COVID. Very powerful woman. And, her husband served for many, many years in the British military, including with the Marine Corps in Afghanistan. Matter of fact, he sent me a flag that hung over in Afghanistan that the U.S. Marines gave him. So I just a shout out to them, because they're amazing people. But that's an important point you may want to address to spouses.
Well, absolutely. And I'm remiss in not mentioning that too. So excellent point on her behalf. In my podcast, I have also interviewed spouses, both, female and male spouses of folks who have served, and talked about what that sacrifice was for them, because they're moving with their spouse every 2, 3, 4 years, and employment for them in a productive path over time, to go from this company to that company. If you want to progress up the ladder, that's very difficult when you're changing jobs every few years. And a lot of employers are like thinking, well, okay, she's married to that Marine. He's going to probably leave in 3 years. How much are we going to, bring her into our organization and build on her? And then she's going to be gone. So yeah, there's a lot of, and I mean, it's a form of discrimination, whatever, right? But it's out there and it's real. And so not only you're having to be a single parent when your spouse deploys, or, not even just deployment. Sometimes you're traveling, CONUS, and you're gone for weeks. Things happen when you're gone. And I was blessed. My wife, she did a remarkable job. I never worried about her or the kids when I was gone, because she's extremely capable. Now, I miss them. I miss them dearly, but I was never concerned that she couldn't do whatever needed to be done. And she was a very successful spouse and person. That's just who she is. But that's a great point. And one other thing real quick, if I may.
Sure.
Twice in my career, I worked with the Royal Marines, the British Royal Marines, as a captain with Security Force Battalion. And then on the 15th MUSOC, we were with 3 Commando. So, we chopped them, and we kicked off the war in, the southeast portion of Iraq at the Alpha Peninsula, secured the port. Then we chopped back to 1 MEF, the 15th MU, and then we rolled up into Anazaria. But I have tremendous respect for the men and women of the Royal Marines, the Royals, as they say. They're brilliant. They are funny. I tell you, their humor, even though it's a little dry, it's pretty amazing. And they have a gun ho attitude, and that connection, Marine to Marine, it's a real thing, across the pond. So yeah, God bless those guys and gals.
100%, 100%. Going forward, so your show, you're going to reinvigorate that in November. You're going to get the podcast once again. Once you do that, I'll put that out for you and share that as well. What's next beyond service, and that's the podcast that you're going to bring back, and then you're continuing to work with Power of Our Story. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. Yeah, I'm now with them. I'm also I'm a content creator, but I'm also a board member. So we kind of shape the programs. Who comes into the programs and leads the different groups that they have, because there's different groups for different needs, so to speak. And so yeah, I'll continue on with them. And in this next season of What's Next Beyond Service, we're going to focus on community and country. I'm going to look at also talking about sex trafficking. That's a tough topic, but it's a significant thing that's happening. It's happening internationally, but America, we're having problems with that. And so I think we need to talk about that. I'm going to talk about and be highlighting veteran-owned businesses. So folks that roll the dice and take the gamble and are out there with their jobs, I want to bring them in and highlight what they're doing and give them a platform to kind of advertise, who they are, what they're doing, and why they're doing it business-wise. And then in terms of that keynote address that I did for Wings Over Wendy's, I want to talk about, and talk to future generations of America, the importance of our history, what it means to be American, and why they should be proud. So, those are some other areas I want to open up and see where they lead.
Well, I will, I don't know if you'll be available, but I will invite you next Saturday in your area. Speaking of the issue of sex trafficking, I'm going to be down there for 2 days, and they have a thing called Freedom Found Charity Ball, and that's for the group that I went when I met you that time. It's called CERT Ministries, and it's also called the Slave Free Project, and it's an organization that is rescuing children from sex traffickers. And the head of it, Pastor Rudy Gonzalez and his family, he was a Force Recon Marine, and so they're going to be having their charity ball next Saturday in Temecula. So I will be attending that, and I'll send you the information. I'll post it on the end of this page as well. If you're available, it'd be great to attend. But at least I can connect you with them, and when you do the podcast, he would be somebody that would be fantastic to invite onto your show and have him share what they're doing. Because it's once again, I don't know if it's because he was a Marine, but he kind of makes fun about that too with everybody, because Marines have a special connection. But him and his family are some of the greatest human beings I've come across in my life, and the work they're doing to rescue these children is just mind-boggling. So it's just one more in-service kind of thing. Someone who's served in the military, served as a police officer, and now he's serving freeing children from sex traffickers. So just some great human beings.
Yeah, he sounds like a remarkable individual, and also the folks that are in his organization, they're doing God's work, I think, right? It's pretty amazing.
100%. And they're risking their life like they did, in other aspects, because you're dealing with the bad guys, and the bad guys have no respect for life. Especially the people who are involved in that cartel of human trafficking. There is no respect for life. So it's a dangerous group of people. Yeah, it is. Anything that you would like to share? Let me just jump back to one more thing with you. So we'll go back to the beginning. When you gave that speech at the keynote, is one of the things you do is give keynotes, and that one that you gave to Wings Over Wendy's, you focused on the Constitution, and focus on, just share a little bit of in a quick thing what that speech was about, and some of the speaking that you do.
Right. Well, thanks for that, John. Yeah. So, yeah, it kind of goes back to understanding the importance of the founding fathers, because from what I know, it's not being taught maybe the same way it was when, we were young and in school. Things change, but there are certain things that we need to remember and that are foundational to our country and where we're going as a country. So I talked to the sacrifice of those men, that they were people of stature, yet they were willing to risk everything for the importance of freedom in establishing the system we have in the Constitution. And so as you look at our history, we've made mistakes as a country, right? We've done things that when you look back on it, it's like, oh my God, that wasn't the best thing. But I believe wholeheartedly through looking at history and being a part of history as a Marine that we strive to get it right. We stumble, but then we get up, we dust ourselves off, and we focus on doing what's right. We come together as a nation to do good. And that's how significant things are in terms of being an American. What does it mean to be an American? I think it means that we are focused on being good people, that again, as we grow, any relationship has problems and challenges, but we do come back to try to do what's right. And I think as we look at what's happening in the world, that's an important filter to look through, right? Because we're not perfect. And we see that things that have happened over time have caused issues and strife in other parts of the world. And without getting too much into what's going on right now, when we talked about listening to people, right? And you asked me about what being courageous means. Being the world superpower, it's kind of a nice place to be, but things change. And I think we need to be aware of that, and that we need to be thinking about where we're going as a nation and listening to what people have to say. And on the political side, we need to knock off the BS that's happening now where we can't get along. Because if we can't get along at home, it's over. So we need to understand, again, the importance of our country, the freedoms our Constitution gives us, and to be willing to stand up for those things and do it correctly, right? Stay within the law, but do what's right and be a good American.
I think that's a great way to close. I think all that is, I 100% agree and respect you for sharing that with us. And once again, Scott, thank you so much for everything you've done in your life, your service on so many different levels, both in the service and outside serving people. And, I always say one of the things I am so lucky is that I don't know how it always happens, but I get to meet some amazing people, and I just keep meeting some of them. And you're another person, thanks to Paul, that if Paul came, I wouldn't have had a chance to meet you. And I'm glad that Paul was unavailable and you became available, and you had a chance to speak to an amazing group, and we got a chance to connect, because I think we'll connect even more in the future. But I really appreciate you for everything you've done and continue to do. And thank you for being on the show, and thank you for sharing all this with the audience.
And well, thank you for having me on, John. I was, again, very humbled and appreciative for the opportunity. And, folks that know you know who you are. You have an amazing story. I could have listened to you like we talked about when we had that coffee. I could have listened to you for, a couple more hours easily about, who you were and who you are now. That whole thing is an amazing story. And I feel blessed that, we got the opportunity to meet each other as well. God works in mysterious ways, right? And he knows what he's doing. So
well, he absolutely does. And, I always say where I've come from to who I am today, I'm like, I have to pinch myself every day to, I'm just so amazed that my life turned out the way it did, because it didn't have to turn out this way. It could have turned out, a lot uglier or a lot worse, and it didn't. So, I just feel grateful every day. I get up, I'm grateful, and I just feel blessed. So part of it is meeting people
Amen.
like you and having you. So yes, amen. A great way to end. Scott, thank you so much. and you have any closing words? Otherwise, we'll close it out.
Okay, yeah, I just real quick, you had
Sure.
mentioned a female Marine that you interviewed, Dr. Teresa Larson. She's an
Yes.
incredible gal. I just wanted to throw her name out there. Yeah, her and I met through LinkedIn, but then we wound up meeting in person, and she's a friend of mine. She is a phenomenal person, talking about service and giving to others. That's what she's all about. And I feel blessed that, she's a friend of mine and she's a solid Marine too. So
She's on my YouTube channel. We had a great interview. I got a chance to.
I
She's
saw
one of
that.
the
Yeah.
few people that I have not yet met in person, but it was a great interview. And she, she has so much to share. She wrote a book, Warrior, as well as what she's doing in the physical training space right now, and just an incredible woman. And just, I don't know, I have to say, and talking about physical, I'm gonna just show this real quick, because this was given to me years ago. I'm sure you'll recognize it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. Pain is weakness leaving the body.
I've wore this shirt in the gym so many times for 10 years now. It was dark black. I don't know what color it is anymore. It's been worn, in a little bit longer, the pieces are going to start falling off of it. But it's,
right.
It's a great message that I take, of that commitment to always push harder, to go stronger, to give your best. I think that's one of the lessons I've come away from all the Marines that I've been honored to meet, is that they shared that with me, and as a civilian, it's inspired me. So I'm glad and I'm honored to know you, man.
Hey, same here, John. Thank you so much. Look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Take care. Have a great weekend. God bless.
Yeah, you too. God bless.
All right, everybody. Just hopefully share this show. It's a great message that Scott shared of service, of commitment to others, commitment to country, to listening to people. I think it was a great conversation that we had. So I hope you get a chance to see this, that you share it with other people so it can impact their lives. And then check out his ongoing, upcoming podcast show, and I'll be sharing that in the future. So have a great weekend, everybody, until we meet again.